Today, we're going to talk about expectations versus reality. Or more accurately, I'm going to talk about how expectations shape reality. By now, we've all heard about the immersive Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow. But just in case you've been living under a rock for a month, or you are coming across this video long after the public has forgotten about the poor, sad Oompa Loompa, here's a recap. In early 2024, a company in Glasgow started advertising for an immersive Willy Wonka experience using these beautiful AI-generated images. When the public showed up to the experience expecting this, instead, they got this. Needless to say, they were disappointed, which is the understatement of the year. Children were crying, parents were angry, the police were called. By far the most memeable event of the year. Watching this saga unfold, I knew I wanted to do an episode not just on the Willy Wonka experience, but on the power of expectations as a whole. Before I dive into that, let me take a brief moment for introductions. I'm Christy Casey, and this is Making Belief, where we're exploring the gray area between fiction and reality. If you're interested in learning how you can make real life moments feel a little bit more like the movies, then this is the channel for you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss an episode. Okay, let's dive in. I want to start by defining cognitive dissonance, which is the contradiction between your previously held ideas and beliefs and new information. Now, when you find yourself experiencing cognitive dissonance, you can respond mainly one of two ways. You can either excuse the inconsistency, telling a story about why this is an isolated incident and you don't need to update your prior beliefs, or you can reject your previously held ideas and update your beliefs accordingly. Really, the most likely option that you're actually going to take is a third one where you slightly update your beliefs in such a way that you don't even consciously realize it. But more on that another day. Now, which direction you wind up going along this spectrum is determined by your latitude of acceptance. Now, what is latitude of acceptance? I'm so glad you asked. Latitude of acceptance is the range of ideas that you find acceptable. There's also latitude of rejection, which is the range of ideas that an individual finds as unacceptable. And then there's the latitude of non-commitment, which is the range of ideas where you're like, I don't know if I believe that enough to accept it, but I don't fully reject it either. So it's kind of this wishy-washy in the middle. So going back to the Willy Wonka example, the decorations that they chose would probably be within my latitude of acceptance for a child's birthday party, but they are certainly not in my latitude of acceptance for a professionally produced immersive experience marketed with those AI images and charging £45 a ticket. Now, what's interesting is when an experience falls within our latitude of acceptance, we are more likely to shift our judgment of that experience to match what our expectations were. So the Barbie movie was objectively probably not as amazing as all the hype that it got, but it was well within my latitude of acceptance, which meant my judgment of it was very high. But on the other hand, if something falls outside of your latitude of acceptance, you're likely to judge it even more harshly than you would have without any expectations at all. For example, when I saw La La Land and it was so hyped up with all the Oscar noms and eventually wins, I had very high expectations of it. I'm a musical theater kid. I love musicals. I think if I saw that movie without anyone else telling me anything about it, I would love that movie. The level of hype that movie got was not within my latitude of acceptance for what I was expecting. I don't hate it. I don't. Did I come out of that theater singing and enjoying myself? Yes, I did. Do I think it deserved Oscars? And do I throw shade at it because it got Oscars? Yes, I do. Look, I love Emma Stone, but in my humble opinion, I don't think that playing a struggling actress is an Oscar-worthy role, no matter how well it's played. Not saying she's not a great performer, not saying she didn't do great at that role. That role is just not an Oscar-worthy role. Just my opinion, don't at me. Anyway, point being, I judged that film far more harshly because of all of the awards and reputation that it has than I would if it was just a fun movie musical. But before you start saying, okay, well, the solution is to under promise and over deliver, there are some other factors you might want to consider. So the first thing I want to talk about is framing. I want to talk about framing, and my camera framing is awful. One personal example of framing in the context of an experience. I was lucky enough to go see Punch Drunk's The Burnt City, not just once, but twice. And my first time through, I found myself essentially chasing after one-on-ones. I prefer experiences where I get to play more of an active role in the story. And Punch Drunk's other famous production, Sleep No More, has these one-on-one experiences that there's no one way to be chosen for one, but you are more likely to get pulled into a one-on-one if you stick close to a specific performer. And so that was my initial approach in attending Burnt City. And I was not having success. And I was getting frustrated. And I was like, trying really hard to earn this experience that this production wasn't designed for. And thankfully, I realized that. And I took a step back and I thought to myself, you would enjoy this production way more if instead of trying to make it what it's not, an interactive piece where you're going to get one-on-one attention, you just appreciated it for what it was. A stunning art installation with incredible physical theater and dance performance, with impeccable lighting and just a beautiful space to explore that's rich and full of detail. And with that framing, of course, I then appreciated the show for what it was and had a great time. And I personally think that there is no other company that does what Punch Drunk does to the level of polish and professionalism that they do. It is truly, truly incredible. And I would have not appreciated it the way I should if I let myself stay caught up in trying to get those one-on-ones, which I later learned from one of the performers weren't even part of the piece at that point. I think they said they were adding more of them, but at the time I first went, there really weren't many one-on-ones to be had, so it would have been a futile effort, which is why I was frustrated. So framing. How you frame your expectations shapes your experience. So the next one I want to talk about is association or affiliation. And that is the phenomena that whenever something that you have an existing opinion, expectation around is associated with something new, you transfer your feelings towards that thing to this new thing. This is the foundation of brand loyalty or fandom. Researchers conducted a study in Massachusetts where they had participants compare two beers. The first beer was just a general Budweiser, and the second beer they labeled MIT beer, which had a secret ingredient. For the first group of participants, they didn't tell them what that secret ingredient was, and overwhelmingly, participants preferred MIT beer. In the second group, they let those participants in on the secret ingredient before they tasted the beer. And that secret ingredient was balsamic vinegar. Now, the participants in this group overwhelmingly did not enjoy MIT beer, knowing that it was essentially the same as the Budweiser, but with balsamic vinegar. A third group was not told the secret ingredient until after they had tasted both and stated their opinion. That group overwhelmingly preferred MIT beer and didn't renege on their choice when they found out that it was balsamic vinegar. So, what can we infer from this? There's a lot of nuanced things that could potentially be gleaned from that study, but the one I want to lean into right now is this positive association with MIT and or negative association with balsamic vinegar. So, a positive association with MIT made participants prefer MIT beer in the first round. In the second round, a negative association with balsamic vinegar outweighed their positive association with MIT. In the third group, their positive association with MIT made them make one decision, and after they had had that experience, the knowledge of this added ingredient that would usually change their taste perception didn't hold the same impact because they had already experienced it and enjoyed it. So maybe the next time you're trying to get a friend to try, I don't know, escargot, don't tell them what it is until after they've tasted it. So association or affiliation is really powerful. This is a big reason why IP-based experiences tend to be really successful. The unknown is scary for a lot of people. So attaching a brand, an IP that they're already familiar with, that they already know they like, can be a really nice bridge for them to feel at ease in the experience. So someone who might not go to sleep no more would happily be excited to go to the Bridgerton experience. Having an existing familiarity association with the IP can create a positive existing expectation for the experience that usually pans out in the experience. I personally had a lot of critiques for the Bridgerton experience, but enjoyed it far more because it was the Bridgerton experience than I would if it was just a random Regency ball. Similarly, with the opposite trajectory, this is the draw of experiential marketing. If a person has a positive experience and that positive experience is associated with your brand, now you have a positive brand association because of the experience. So it can go both ways. You have a positive experience because of an existing positive brand association, or you can have a positive brand association because of an experience that you had. So the next idea I want to talk about is investment. If you were a scientist studying doomsday cults, one would expect that when the prophecy of whatever end of the world, aliens coming prediction doesn't come true, that the group would fall apart. Surprisingly, you'd be wrong. In a study of 12 doomsday cults, after all of their prophecies failed to come true, 11 out of 12 of those groups survived, meaning that those groups kept practicing their ideals. Many even amped up their proselytizing and pushed their beliefs harder. How is this possible? Any rational person might ask. Well, when a person has a very firmly held belief with strong conviction and a strong amount of social support, it's powerful. In another episode, I'll talk about spice, where social reinforcement, I believe, is the most powerful influence on our perception of reality. But more on that in another episode. So these cult members become so invested in this prophecy that it makes it really hard for them to back out. And so instead of updating their beliefs and realizing that they were wrong, they rationalize why their predictions were just a little bit off, and they edit them to make space for them to hold on to that belief a little bit longer, because that is easier than questioning this identity that they've built for themselves. They've probably alienated themselves from their previous social group. They've maybe lost work or quit a job. If the cult was believing it was the end of the world, they might have gotten into tremendous amounts of debt. These people often make huge life choices based on these ideas, and backing out from them would not only undermine their beliefs, but it would undermine their identity. I know from personal experience how difficult it is to uproot not just my beliefs about the world, but my beliefs about who I am and my entire social life. So while cult themes are a trope that is common in the immersive and interactive industry, I hope none of us are literally indoctrinating our guests. To indoctrinate means to teach someone to accept a certain set of beliefs uncritically. So if you're removing people's critical thinking, stop. Don't become an actual cult leader, please. Anyways, the idea of investment is where a positive brand association becomes brand loyalty. So a continued positive experience becomes an expectation of a positive experience that's solid enough that when the experience isn't positive, you see it as an anomaly and not something that would change your opinion of the brand or of the IP or of the experience. If a positive brand association makes someone expect a positive experience, then an investment in a brand helps them overlook individual negative experiences. Now, how to gain investment from your guests is definitely too much to address in this video, but I'll share some examples. My mom loves Disney. She goes to Disney every year for her birthday. If a cast member has a bad day and is rude once, she's had so many other positive experiences with cast members. She's not writing off the entire brand based on an isolated experience. She is isolating that experience away from her positive association with Disney. Another example is when I was working with the deep dive on Open Mind, and I was one of the main writers on the project. It was like a big sci-fi multiverse plot that was complex. And I was really worried because it was such an open piece where our participant could bring up any topic they wanted, that there would be plot holes and that the world would fall apart. There were moments where our participant, Brian, brought up things that we hadn't answered, and the world didn't break. He was invested enough in our story that he actually helped us close those potholes and helped justify, even when an actor might have said something a little bit out of character or out of world, it would have been incorporated into the world instead of breaking the world, which wouldn't have been the case if he hadn't already decided that he was going to treat this world as real. When you get trolls in immersive experiences and they're like poking at the story, they're doing that because they're not invested enough in the success of the story yet. My mentor, Jeff Worth, would say, instead of suspending disbelief like you do in the theater, he'd say that we're asking our participants to invest belief. And when they have invested belief, they're gonna contribute to making the story better. If you're able to get your people invested in your story, instead of trying to sabotage your experience, they're going to make it better and they're going to contribute because they're invested. And if it's not a narrative experience, they're going to adopt the energy or the culture of the space that you've created and become ambassadors for others to share in their enthusiasm. So bringing this back to the idea of the latitude of acceptance, when you get to the point of customer loyalty, you have essentially expanded the latitude of acceptance for that person. So the deeper the person's investment in that brand, experience, cult, whatever the thing is, the wider their latitude of acceptance will be. The last idea I want to talk about is anchoring. Anchoring is when you give the person a specific baseline, and then that baseline establishes their expectations. The most frequently used example that I've seen is when a salesperson is selling a jacket, and the price tag on that jacket says $600. And when the salesperson walks up to you and they're like, "Oh, do you like that jacket?" And you're like, "Yeah, but it's expensive." And they go, "Oh, well, actually, it's 50% off. It costs $300. And now you're thinking, well, that's a pretty good deal. It's a $600 jacket. It's now $300. But if it just said $300 to begin with, you'd probably still think that price was high. Now, I don't care if it's 50% off. I'm not spending $300 on a jacket. I'm going to go to the thrift store and get it used for $15 or $40, depending on the jacket. But not the point. So obviously anchoring has implications for pricing. I think anchoring is maybe one of the reasons why Star Cruiser didn't pan out. Certainly pricing was one of the main things that people would talk about. I don't think it was overpriced at all. I think some people couldn't afford it. I could barely afford it. I certainly couldn't have afforded to go several times like some people did, but that doesn't mean that it was overpriced. But because the label Star Wars Hotel was what people knew it as, the price of a hotel was the anchor that they were setting it against. And yeah, compared to a hotel, it's expensive, but it's a lot more than a hotel. It is a full 2 days worth of performances, plus all of your meals, plus your park tickets. And when you add up the value of all of that, plus the absolutely unique, unparalleled experience, it becomes a completely different calculation. Anchors don't always have to be about numbers, though. I think it's just any established baseline. Because immersive is so ephemeral, it's really hard to establish anchor points for the industry. And I think this is both a challenge and an opportunity. It's an opportunity because for people who don't have any anchor points at all, we get to set that expectation for them. And there's a lot of room to surprise them and give them an experience they've never had before. But it's also a huge challenge because you have to overcome people's fear of the unknown, or if they only have one anchor point, then they're going to be coming into your experience with a specific expectation that you don't have any control over. I feel like people who've been to a lot of immersive experiences are able to reframe the experience for themselves and like categorize it in their own way. But for people who only have one or two anchor points to refer to, it's really hard to frame your language. Like the same words would mean something different to someone who's only done escape rooms than it would to someone who's only been to Sleep No More, which is really hard. But that's why it's so important that we are proactively designing for people's expectations and trying as best as we can to set those expectations up to align with the actual experience. So to come full circle back to our Willy Wonka experience, I hope that this becomes an all press is good press kind of situation, and that people who hear about it become curious about immersive overall. And well, hey, they've set the expectation real low for the rest of us. Hopefully that expectation is not so low that they give up on immersive experiences altogether. I do think post the Willy Wonka experiences, audiences will be a lot more skeptical, particularly of experiences that are using AI imagery to market. People are going to want to see some actual production photos to be confident that the experience that they're buying is the experience they're going to get. So if you're thinking about using AI imagery in your marketing campaigns, you maybe want to rethink that. Whew. I think it is finally time to wrap up this episode. I feel like there is still so much nuance that I could continue to unpack, but I'm tired and this was already a lot. So hopefully you've held on this long. I'd love to hear in the comments below if any of these ideas in particular stood out to you. Do you think you'll use these in your experience design work, or have you used these ideas in past experiences? I'm really curious. So I would love for you to start the conversation below, and I will definitely be responding to all of your comments. I really hope that this channel becomes a way to connect with other people who are passionate about all this stuff. So if that's you, hi. Thanks for being here. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps the channel grow, and it really helps me stay motivated, because the reason I do this is to connect with people like you who are also interested in all of these nerdy psychology experience design things. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, remember, we are making believe. Bye.